Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop. I love it when I show off a really cool new tool that's brand new on the scene only to find out someone's done it before. There is nothing new under the sun. And recently I did a video on this, the VP60 from Bridge Cities Tools. Really cool plane. The iron on this can go all the way down to almost 25 degrees and then all the way up to almost 90 degrees, and it does anything in between, and it's got bolts and fixtures and all sorts of different things. It's the Mighty Morphin Power hand plane. But just before putting the video out on this beast, I found out that someone did that about 150 years before. The year is 1868, and a guy by the name of Palmer puts in a patent to the US Patent Office for an interesting plane with the bevel that's adjustable. Not only that, but it has a movable mouth in 1868. That's right, 1 year after Stanley came out with his patent, we have the patent for this monstrosity. I mean, just take a look at that frog. Now this one doesn't have a huge amount of adjustment like you would see with the VP60, but with this one I can go from around 30 degrees all the way up to around 50 degrees. So it's not the extreme amount, and part of that's because the fulcrum is right down here rather than being at the tip of the blade. It's back a little ways. One of the earlier patents on it actually had a slide that could be bolted and be at a much greater range. But most of the time the arguments are around 40 to 50 degrees, and so this covers all of those angles. But that's a lot of talking. I want to actually go and show you some of this because there are a whole pile of different levers on this that make it do some really crazy stuff. So on top here we have this thing, which is both the lever cap and the chip breaker all in one. Once we loosen it up, you can see how it slides up and then comes out with those notches. Kind of an interesting design, and so this becomes the chip breaker right at the front as well as the lever cap to hold it all down. Behind that we can pull out the iron, and the iron has 3 different holes in it. Those holes correspond with this little plate, which has these ridges on the back. So I can put that into any of these holes and theoretically adjust it up and down, but I think this one was actually riveted on, though I haven't seen others to actually compare it. This is the only one I've had a chance to look at. Underneath we have this weird looking frog assembly, and in the back we have 1, 2, 3 different levers. This one on the top is actually the depth adjustment, not the lateral adjuster. You can see how this cam with the screw off-centered will actually push this slide up and down that will push this block up and down. Then behind that we have this middle lever, and that middle lever, oh look at that, that's the lateral adjuster. So that moves a cam on the bottom, the exact same mechanism as the one on the top, but down on the bottom. So you can pull out the cam underneath, the block, and the slide. The lateral is just the same thing, but with a cam underneath. Well, I have it apart. You can actually see these claws that come up on the other side, and those hold on to the iron and the chip breaker, and that whole mechanism is actually on a spring. If I zoom in here, you can actually see the spring underneath that gives that little bit of movement. Then there's this lever underneath, and this one actually will raise and lower the bed by about 3 degrees. So you can get an adjustment from there to locking it in place. And then underneath that we can raise this up, and you can see the screw has this nut that allows it to slide. That nut fits into the body, and with that nut we can actually get the majority of our movement up and down. But the really funky thing is here at the front you've got a mouth that opens and closes and locks down on this in 1868. Because as you change the angle of the iron, you're actually moving it backward and forward, especially since the fulcrum isn't at the tip. The fulcrum is actually back behind the iron a little bit, so when it swings, the tip goes forward and backward. So now let's put this all back together and see if we can actually get a shaving with this old bird. And the answer is, kind of, but I'm having a little bit of trouble with this one. Not to mention it's just odd to adjust because it's not the standard Bailey. But I'm getting weird shavings, and usually when you're getting weird shavings, it's usually saying the sole isn't flat. Not to mention, after just sharpening it, also the iron is really dull. Yeah, it actually apparently is a very, very soft iron and dulls out very quickly. But I wonder what would happen if I raised it up and tried a higher angle on this. Let's take it for a second drive. With the higher angle, it's kind of scratching a bit more, but I'm still getting the same problems And the weird thing about this is I can get really heavy shavings, where I can loosen it up a little bit, and I can get almost nothing. And I'm just kind of bumping it with my finger to set the depth. And just the tiniest little bit of movement takes me from really heavy shaving to almost nothing. And part of that is because I actually checked this bed and it's relatively out of flat. One of the big problems is this just doesn't hold its settings. If it gets bumped at all, it changes out. Not, oh, yep, see, I just bumped it. Now I'm not going to get anything. I just work it back, see if I can get a nice light shaving. Nope, it's just, it's not a good user. So let's talk about price. Oh yes, a piece of history from 150 years ago with an interesting patent and good information. This has got to be worth a lot. No, honestly, they're not. They're worth about the same as a number 2. They're around, yeah, 150 to 200 bucks depending upon their condition. And are they a good user? No, but you're probably not going to find them that often because I've been in the hand tool business for 10 years and this is only the second one that I've come across in the wild. So, yeah, don't go looking for them, but it's kind of interesting. And it's a lot cheaper than a VP60, which, yeah, you're going to be looking at like the price of a car rather than the price of an average bench plane. Now, I didn't look into it to see if the Metallic Plane Company had been purchased by Stanley. I suspect they were. Most other plane companies were purchased out by Stanley and just kind of pushed off to make the competition disappear. Because, I mean, it is an interesting mechanism with a little bit of refinement. It might be something that was actually functional. But how often do you actually need to change the angle of your bed? So it's kind of nice, but not terribly necessary. Now the opening and closing mouth, I wish a lot of other planes started to have that because that might actually be useful. But the bed angle thing, take it or leave it. I do have to say a huge thank you to Jeff Rashowski, Reed Planes. He was the actually one who bought this and loaned it to me because we're doing all of the testing. He wanted to play around with it too. So thank you, Jeff. I'll be sending it back to you. So I hope you liked this video. If you have any other interesting questions, ideas, thoughts, snide remarks, things I should talk about, please let me know those in the comments down below. And if you have any other information on this, throw it in the comments. I do like reading through that, and I learn lots of other things. There really isn't a whole lot out on these planes, and it was a bit of fun to dig through. Now, I would tell you to like, comment, share, and subscribe, but I'm not going to do that this time because you are smart people, and you know that really what you want to do is become a patron, because I do lots of fun things for patrons, such as regular giveaways and other behind-the-scenes things. And if you'd like to find out more about that, go down below and become a patron on Patreon, because it's patrons that support this channel rather than some mattress company or something else. Thank you. Without you guys, I would not be here. So I think that'll do it for today, and until next time, have a wonderful day. Finally, I came to a plane that's surprised as I am. When you work with adjustable planes as a coworker, you have to be very, very careful because occasionally they're angling for something.